Welcome to the Generic Tech Support YouTube channel. Because not all of us know how to hack with sunglasses on. Like and subscribe for more content. Hey guys, welcome back. So in today's video, I want to just do a community reply. So I've gotten a lot of comments and an enormous amount of views on the original Windows 11 alternative Linux Mint build video. And I don't know who published it, where, or where it got published. I don't have social media outside of just this account. So whoever published it, thank you very much for whoever did it. That was awesome. Getting all the views that video got and the outreach and the communication to really showcase an alternative to Windows and Mac. So in this video, I really want to reply to a couple of comments. More along the lines of questions that have to do with the Linux Mint operating system that refer to the first couple videos. Now, there will be more videos to come. So far, I just have 5 in the series. I may make a 6th, 7th. I've been thinking I might actually release a completely different one as well outside of the Windows 11 alternative to showcase how to do heat mapping on wireless using a Linux operating system free of charge. You don't have to spend a ton of money on a laptop to do heat mapping in an office or heat mapping in a building. And basically what a heat map is wireless heat mapping. So where do you put your wireless APs, your access points? How far apart do you have to put them? What's the saturation in the current environment? What bands do you want to use? What channels do you want to use? Things of that nature. How to do that in a Linux environment like Mint. For free. Really, at that point, all you would need is a laptop with preferably an Intel chipset. TrendMet would work too. USB adapter would work too. Broadcom's a little flaky, so that's why I say preferably an Intel chipset. But Netgear, Linksys, those things would work fine too as a USB connected device. But those are something that I'd like to do in the future. So let's jump into this video and go over some of the questions or the comments that existed in the previous video and showcase some of those options or those changes or how-tos in this particular system. So I'll just start off with the reference point, right? We're going to talk a lot about Windows comparison in this operating system in this video. So if you're not from a Windows environment, you're from a Mac environment, I apologize. I don't know the comparative in a Mac. I don't really get into Macs that often. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with them per se. They're just a little outside of my price range as far as what I would be comfortable in spending on a system that doesn't do everything I would need it to do. Now, that to say, it doesn't mean that it's not a good system, especially now with the M chips. I've really been looking into purchasing a Mac Mini with the M chip. I think it's the M4 chip as the bargain basement machine, only because I want to use that M chip, which is a RISC-based processor, to run RISC-based operating systems from earlier on, to do testing and to showcase those videos in here as well. Like, for instance, going to the 64 platform of Windows XP, not the x86, x64 AMD chip, but the RISC chip. I think it would be interesting to see what that looks like on those M.dot processors, or even if that would work on those RISC-based processors. Because technically the IA processor is RISC, so it should work, but that doesn't mean it will. I would also like to take a look at the Ubuntu platform that runs on RISC. Keep in mind, like, Raspberry Pis are technically RISC, so anything that is a RISC-based application or operating system should run on those M chips on the Apple, and it'd be really cool to see that. Now, on the Microsoft side, you could buy a Surface with, I think, the Snapdragon processor. That's RISC-based as well, which means that Windows 11 now supports RISC chipset, which means that, in theory, you should be able to install Windows 11 on a Mac. So when people go out and buy a Mac after they dump their $300 or $400 Windows 11 laptop and they say the Mac is so much better, I'm curious if Windows 11 would boat anchor that same Mac that everybody says is so much better. And I think that would make good content for a video. So leave me something down in the comments and let me know what you think. But let's jump further into this video and let's do a comparison between some Windows configurations and the Linux Mint operating system to showcase how to do what has been asked in some of the comments. So I got a comment from Henry Best, and Henry wrote that he wants to know, how do we create files, icons, shortcuts, things of that nature on the desktop to mimic what we get with Windows? I guess the question is more along the lines of, what if I don't want something in the start menu, but I want something on the desktop like I would have in my Windows environment? Like on my computer, or the access to documents, pictures, files, videos, shortcuts to folders. And I would suggest, even in Windows, is to use shortcuts and don't put folders on your desktop. And the reason why is because even in a Windows environment, when you put a folder on a desktop and you fill that folder, it makes your profile big. And the bigger your profile is, the slower your machine will be. So if we talk about that in a Windows fashion, or a Windows configuration, what that means additionally is that if you add things into your My Documents, your My Pictures, your My Videos, that also increases the size of your profile. So generally speaking, what you'd want to do is to go into your local C drive and create a folder and call it like My Stuff, and then put all of your stuff in there. Now, the only time you don't want to do that is if the machine is shared, because data that's locked into a profile as a user that doesn't have multiple admins on a system, but all our users are locked to that user. So only that user will have access to those files. However, if everybody's an admin, it doesn't make any difference anyway. So with that said, usually you don't want to put things on the desktop. You want to put things in the C drive and then create a shortcut on the desktop. And I'm going to do that here because that's the best practice, is not to put things physically on the desktop, especially large folders with large amounts of files that get large in size. So let's jump into the File Explorer, or Files on Mint. And we're going to see a multiple of files, or folders rather. So we do have the applications that we did for our install and remove, which those videos should release here in the next couple of days for the removal process, how to remove applications. We did the bash, how to create a simple bash file for system installation. That was released yesterday, I believe. So let's now take a look at how to create shortcuts on the desktop. Now, you can right-click on the desktop, and we can do create new and create an empty document, right? And call this thing like just random text document. All right, so we have a random text document, so that's now on the desktop. But what if we want to create a shortcut to a folder? How do we do it? This is going to be a little more difficult for me to show you because I can't show you the keystrokes on the actual screen. However, if I select something, let's say documents for instance, and I hit the Control and the Shift key on the keyboard, and I hold them. And then I take the documents folder and I left click and I drag it to the desktop and release the left click while still holding the Control and the Shift, it will create a shortcut to documents. So this is now the same location as this, just a different way to access it from the desktop. Now that's how to create a shortcut to a folder on the desktop, and that's what I would suggest you do versus moving these to the desktop, because you can do like a new folder here, and we'll call it Tools. You can grab this folder and just drag it directly to the desktop without hitting the Control and Shift on the keyboard, and it will move the folder from the home location to the desktop. Okay, so what if we now want to add the equivalent of, say, like My Computer to the desktop, right? So if we talk about like Windows XP days, we had the My Computer, which is like the home directory, which is basically what we're looking at here. How do we get here on the desktop as a shortcut? So what you're going to want to do is you're going to open up the files, or go back to the file location just like we have here. We'll go to the file system, we'll locate the home folder, and we'll open that. And then we're going to have the user account. So this is my username on my machine, is Tor. It's just a play on root. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually create a shortcut of this on the desktop. So once again, we're going to hold the Control and the Shift, and we're going to left click on this, and we're going to drag it to the desktop, and then release the left click while still holding the Control and Shift. And there we go. Now we have the Tor shortcut. So if I close out of this and I double click on Tor shortcut, that's going to bring us to our home directory, which is the same thing as having, say, the files location down here, right? And you could create whatever you want to go wherever you want in the actual system as a shortcut on the desktop, and create as many shortcuts on the desktop as you want. So you make as many as you want. Again, keep in mind that putting files on here that are huge in Windows would cause catastrophic performance issues. However, doing it in Linux, because the Linux kernel works a little different, it's a flat file system, it's not an active file system, you really shouldn't have any problems adding as much as you want to the actual desktop if you just want to put it on the desktop. Something else that may come across, or maybe an additional question, is how do you put applications on the desktop? Well, you could go down into the Start menu here, and we could look for an application on this particular system. I don't actually know if there's anything major on here. We'll just go to install. Well, we'll go to Celluloid, which is basically just a video player, and we're going to right-click on this. And you're going to see an option to add to desktop. So if we click on that, there you go. Now it's on the desktop. We could play it from there, which in essence is really just a shortcut to the actual application that exists in the Start menu. And so once again, that's really how you would add things to the desktop. And hopefully, Henry, this helps you out. So it gives you some visual as to how this works. Okay, so another question that I got asked is about updates. Why we would use the terminal to update versus using the GUI. And I want to touch base on this a little bit and kind of give you some clarity as to how this works. So if you do the update through the terminal, and you learn how to do the sudo apt-get update, sudo apt-get upgrade, in knowing just those two commands, you could work in Mint, Zorin, Ubuntu, Parrot, Kali, and about 100 different flavors of Debian-based Ubuntu derivative operating systems, and still update them. Learning those two commands will teach you how to update 100 different distros. However, using the GUI is slightly different in all of them. So it's something to keep in mind, is that if you know those two commands, you can update any system. But if you know only the actual GUI, it's a little different. Now, let's go over how to do this in the GUI. Now, generally, I would mention names of people who put comments down below, so you could, do the @whatever, so we could actually address questions. But I figured for the sake of this, because there were multiple questions from multiple people as to why not to do this, or why to do this, or why not to use the GUI, I'm just going to make a blanket statement here for using the GUI versus using the terminal. And again, it's entirely up to you as to what you're comfortable doing. Sometimes I do the GUI, sometimes I use the terminal. It really depends on the day. Sometimes I find it easier to do one versus the other. I will tell you that, generally speaking, the terminal is a lot faster, and you can do it whenever you want. It's less annoying. You don't get as many prompts. One of the most annoying things with Windows was the fact that it would randomly update in the middle of the day when you're in like a game or doing something. If you use the terminal, you don't have to deal with that, because the configuration of the actual GUI won't force the update and the reboot and screw things up on you in the middle of the day. So again, that's another reason to use the terminal, but let's jump into the GUI and take a look at our updates configuration. Okay, guys, so we're going to hit up the various locations inside the GUI, and I'm going to show you how to do the updates through the GUI. So we're going to click on the Start menu, and we're going to go specifically at the top here, and we're going to look for Snap, S-N-A-P. And we're going to click on the App Center. So once we're in the App Center, if we do a search for an app, like for instance on this system, I know that Teams is installed. If I do a search for Teams for Linux, I'm going to see the option to open, and I'm likely going to see the option to uninstall. However, if there's updates available in here, we would be able to update the actual Teams for Linux application through here. However, with that said, if you want to check for updates, what you'll have to do is you'll have to go to Manage. And at the top up here where you'll see Manage, you'll see Check for Updates. So if I do a search, I add the Show System Snaps, we'll see all the snaps installed on this particular system, or all the packages that are associated to snaps. So if I click Check for Updates at this point, we're going to check for updates on whatever snaps are actually installed. And then we have the option to update all if there are updates available for our snap packages. And that's how you would update the snap packages on your system. Now the corresponding update version of that in the terminal, I'll show you that too. And all that is it's sudo snap refresh. And then you would hit enter. You'd put in your credentials. And then you'd hit enter. And it'll tell you all snaps are up to date. So that's how you do what you just did here in the GUI by going into the start menu, doing a search for the snap, which would allow you to open the App Center, which brings you to here. Click on Manage, and then you check for updates, and you'd update all. When you hit the Update All, you'll probably get prompted for your password, same as you would on the terminal. Now again, personally, I think it's easier just to type in sudo snap refresh, but you know, I realize that some people are more comfortable using the GUI than they are the command line, but the command line will update all the 100 different versions where the App Center may not be as easily to find in different versions or revisions or even exist, because you can install snaps without the snap GUI installed. So that's something else to keep in mind, is that if you can't get to this doesn't exist, you can't find it, but you do have snap packages installed, that sudo snap refresh will still install or update those packages on your system. Not install, but update the packages. All right, let's take a look at the apt repository next. So before we jump into the apt repository, what I want to do is I want to click on Start, and I want to show you, I'm just going to type in Update. I'm going to show you the software sources. Now this is important because this is how you make sure or maintain the security of the system during the update process. So we're going to click on Software Sources. And that should prompt you for the authentication if you haven't already authenticated at some point on the system. So let's take a look at the sources. Now, during the first video, we went over setting up PPAs or adding the plugins for the update sources for certain applications. Now, in the configuration here, in the software sources, you're going to have the option to add those same PPAs through here. So you could click on Add here, and you could add whatever the PPA is that exists. So if we go back into the Files location, and we go into our script for our application install, and we do the open with the text editor, we could go in here, and if we scroll up to the top, we know that we have the repository here for Multiverse, or for instance, for Mozilla, for the more or less the Firefox stuff. So we could go in here, and we could see that the default tells you how this should be written out, right? So it should be written out as PPA colon, so PPA colon, then we see the name, so we just say the PPA name, and then we see the PPA itself, which is just PPA. So if we grab this and we copy it, and we go back here into the GUI and we paste it, and we hit OK, that's going to add the Mozilla stability. So this is Firefox and Thunderbird update package availability to the actual system. So there we go. Now we have it. So now we could click here to update the apt cache. So that's that apt get update that we would run on the actual command line or in the terminal. So let's click that. We're going to see the cache update. Okay, so now we have the ability to update our Firefox packages using the apt-get package or the update package that exists, so the software updater. And you could do that with all of this stuff too. Like for instance, if we wanted to add this PPA tom, which is the YTDLP, we could do that. We just copy it, go to add. It'll pre-fill since we already copied it. We're just going to paste it anywhere, and we're going to just hit on OK. And you're going to see the options that this is going to give. I'm going to hit OK. So now we have the DLP updater available. We're going to just click to update the apt cache again. And that's the equivalent of literally running this command, this apt-get add repository, and then sudo apt-get update. So this one right here is the same thing as adding those two things here into the GUI. Okay, so let's talk about additional repositories. Now, this is a place where you would go to add like paid applications. So if you have purchased something and you wanted to continue to update it, chances are it would be an additional application and not a PPA. So the configuration as such is here for you to add. You could also do this through the terminal, but if you need to do it through the GUI, this is how you would do it. You would just add the repository here. And if we click on add, we could see it. So here's the deb package itself. And that would give us the ability to install said deb package. Now, you could also, if you wanted to, because we know that the deb already exists, you could use, instead of the wget down here, you could actually grab this particular URL, right? So we grab this particular URL and we threw that in here as a deb package, which it is a deb package. We can see the .deb on the end, right? You could do that, and then the system would automatically add that additional package to the system. Now, if you created like an asterisk or a wildcard in there, every time that package got updated, it would update the package through here as well. So you could use the sudo apt-get update or go through the update manager to update that package through here. Generally speaking, I would tell you not to do that just because you're trusting a source that is questionable at best with these types of links. So I would tell you not to do that automated. But that is a way to do it automated through the GUI. So for the sake of this and sake of keeping things simple, I'm not going to go into authentication keys per se. We'll just say that it's using cryptology to actually lock down authentication mechanism. We're not going to do that in here. We're going to go next to maintenance and take a look at that. So in maintenance, you're going to see options to maintain the actual packages. You can downgrade the foreign packages. So if you want to move back to a previous version, like something doesn't work right in your updated version, you could go through here. You could remove foreign packages altogether. We could create, purge residual configuration. We could fix merge list problems. Generally speaking, under maintenance, likely the only two things you would ever really use in here is the downgrade the foreign packages or remove foreign packages from the system if you had to. However, there are ways to just uninstall it, and that will be the next video. It should be released tomorrow. So that's something to check out. Okay, so that's configuration in our software sources. We're going to just close out of here. We're going to close out of our script. And we're going to jump now into the actual update portion of this. So to do that, we're just going to click on Start. And we're going to type in Update. And we're going to go to the Update Manager. We're going to click on that. So when you first open this thing, you'll probably see exactly what we see here, which is quite a bit of stuff. We're going to see Information. If we go under Packages or Changelog, we would see additional information, and that would be down below. Specifically, this is going to be things that we've already installed or things that we are installing during the installation process. By default, it's minimized, so you probably won't notice it unless you really click down below. So something that exists in here that's a little different than Windows is the ability to use the local mirror. And what that actually means is specifically like demographically speaking where you are. So if you're in a location that is closer to like New York City, and you want to download the updates, if you click yes to switch to the local mirror, it's going to switch to the New York City location of servers to download the updates. If you live closer to California and you hit yes, it'll switch to the servers that are local to California and then pull the updates. If you choose, however, not to and you say no, then what it'll do is the system will automatically look for the fastest server around, but not necessarily the local server. So it may find a faster server in Canada, but you may be closer to New York City. So while the server is faster, it doesn't mean that the network connection is faster. So you may find that in a situation where you say no, you get faster download speeds sometimes, but not all the times. Whereas if you say yes, you may get faster download speeds, but the server itself may not be as fast. So you really got to play with that a little bit and see what works best for you. Generally speaking, I just leave it alone and let the system do what it needs to do, at least from the GUI perspective, because it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, to me, the updates are negligible. They don't take that long to install. I mean, if you're talking a fresh build and you want to update all the updates, it may take you 20 minutes on a connection that's at least 60 megs in speed. If you have like a 300 or 500 meg connection, it'll probably take you 5 to 10 minutes to download the entire update, including the kernel and everything that goes with it in the latest version of Mint. And that's on a system that's like a 6th or a 7th gen processor. I'm not talking like state-of-the-art stuff. So I'd tell you like that option is entirely up to you. Okay, so these are the updates that are available currently on this system. Now, I will point out that this system, all of these Linux systems basically revert back to a certain version in time. And the reason why is, again, I don't want to keep increasing the disk space on my VM system. But with that said, that means that all the updates that if I applied them now, when I rebooted the system, they'd be gone again. Which obviously, for your situation, won't be the case, but on my situation is the case. So with that said, I have all these updates available on this system. Now, if I'm concerned that these updates, this cache, took place when I first initially built this system and it's not the most up-to-date, I could click refresh, and it'll re-pull the cache for the package down to the system and check again to see what updates I have or what I'm missing. And if, well, unfortunately I wasn't quick enough, but if you click the little drop down there, it will show you specifically what it's downloading. Okay, so we have 116 updates at 920 megs to download. But before we do that, what I want to do is I want to show you some options in here. So we're going to click on Edit, and we're going to go to Preferences. Okay, so one of the things you're going to want to do in here, if you're going to do the updates through the actual preference package, so through the Guey, is you're going to want to set your auto refresh, your notifications, your packages, and your automation. And specifically what we want to do is we want to make sure that you have the refresh list of updates checked to automatic. Now, the first refresh list of updates after, what that is when we're in the update itself and we clicked on the refresh button here, that's this refresh here. So every 10 minutes, this list would refresh itself. And then we're going to refresh the list of updates and then we're going to say 2 hours. So what this does is it basically keeps the manager itself running, which is this little shield down here that we could see. And it keeps it running in the background checking for updates. Now on Windows, this does the same thing. Windows, I believe, is every, don't quote me on it because I'm not physically looking at it, but I think in the policy configuration, it's every 720 minutes, the system will pull for an update to the cache. But every 15 minutes, the system looks for just miscellaneous updates, like things like Defender or things like your spam filtering configuration with Outlook. It pulls that update every 15 minutes. On this, it's the same thing with the auto refresh. So I would set it as 10 minutes and 2 hours, which should be the default, and just leave it alone. That should be adequate for most machines. Now, if you don't want to automatically update, just uncheck this, and you could use the sudo commands in the terminal to do the same thing. Now, the additional portion of this is the notification. If you don't want to be notified and you're saying, nah, forget that, I don't want to be notified, it's really annoying to be notified constantly with pop-ups or balloons saying that there's updates pending, then just uncheck that. You could see when you do that, the updates that are available still show. It just isn't going to pop up on the screen that we have updates available to install. So in other words, it still give you the indication that you have updates available by the little shield with the little notification, little orange or red blob there. But it's not going to give you a pop-up on the screen to tell you that there's updates available or pending that need to be installed. So this is really a preference thing. If you're the type of person that doesn't check the taskbar, doesn't know to look for this little thing, then leave this on. If you're not that person, you can shut it off. Okay, so the next part is we have to look at packages. Now, in packages, generally, I would tell you to just leave this alone. However, I would also tell you that you could create block packages in here. So if you have customized drivers installed for like NVIDIA or your ATI card, you can add those packages in here so it blocks the update of those so it doesn't brick your system. This is helpful for people that run newer NVIDIA cards. If you're running something that's older, you don't really have to worry about this. But the newer NVIDIA cards, because the NVIDIA drivers are not amazing on Linux. ATI drivers are great. They work usually out of the box fantastic. Now, with that said, I have a 4090 RTX on my work computer, and I don't have that issue. I don't have any problems with it. It updates. Everything's fine. But I have heard from other people that I work with and other people in the Linux community that there are issues with the NVIDIA drivers on some cards. And if you run into an issue where you see that you're having those issues, you could figure out specifically what that package is by looking inside of the, inside of the update manager under the packages down here after you do the update to see which package is associated with that video card. And then you could add that package information in here to block the update from occurring on it again, so you don't have those issues. Works just like Windows. Remember in Windows when you would go into the GUI in like Windows XP and Windows 7, where you could uncheck the update so it didn't apply? It's basically the exact same thing here. Imagine having the ability to block updates. What a concept. Especially in Windows 10 and 11, it's almost unheard of. You need a server basically to stop the ability to install updates. But yes, in 7 and prior, for those that don't know, you could actually uncheck the update and stop the ability for Windows to install that update when it broke your machine. Okay, so let's look at automation. So automation, just as it says, is a way to automate the updates. So make them automatic updates. Automatic updates means you won't get this little prompt down here. It will just install the updates when they become available. This is up to you. I would err on the side of caution in doing this, just because if you're running things that are already open, the system won't update them, and if they stay open indefinitely, you may never get an update on them. Generally in Linux, when you run the updates, you want to make sure all of the applications, everything that is on the system is turned off, right? So you want to be at the base desktop without all the crap running, because if it goes to run an update on Firefox, but Firefox is already open, it's not going to run the update on Firefox. So I would tell you not to use automation, but if you're the type of person that will not update and you need to use automation, then that's what this is. So package updates. If we choose to do that, we could click this little thing and it'll run the package updates. These are all the packages, right? This is what we see here. Other updates. Cinnamon spices. Now a cinnamon spice is basically the cinnamon desktop, which is what we're on here. The spices are like applets. Those are additions you could add into the taskbar, and desklets, which are additions you could add in on the desktop. Now that video will release next Tuesday. That is on, I think next Tuesday is the 14th. That's going to go specifically through all of the configuration with the desklets, the applets, the extensions, and how to make Mint visually the operating system you want it to look like. So the other option you could do is you could update the flat packs automatically. Now, a flat pack, despite what people may believe, is not an isolated application. It's really a semi-containerized application that will basically run on Arch Linux, it'll run on Debian, it'll run on all the different flavors of Linux. It's a containered version of an application in the sense that it uses its own code to run. However, it doesn't necessarily translate into an isolated application. So it can still infect other applications if it was itself infected and set up to do so. With that said, with an update portion of this, it shouldn't really make much of a difference if you choose to update it automatically versus not automatically. But once again, if you're the type of person that has all of these applications open all the time and you don't close anything and you run the update automated, then Linux will more than likely just skip that particular version of the update and you'll never get the updated version of that application. Which is why I would suggest not using the automation portion of this to do the updates if you are that type of person. And only you will know if you're that type of person. The last one on here, which is the automatic maintenance, is the remove obsolete kernels and dependencies. Whatever you do, do not turn this on, especially if you're on older hardware, because you could have the older dependencies, the older kernel configuration still intact during your update process. And if you remove them and you have a problem, you can't roll back. And that could cause some serious issues if you're running really old hardware. I think by default, and don't quote me on this because I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think by default, the latest version of Ubuntu, which I think is 24, the LTS version, has this turned on by default, which is why a lot of people that upgraded from version 22 or whatever it was, I think it was 22 for the long-term service version prior, that upgraded the kernel to the latest 24 version. When this turned on, it deleted all the drivers for the things like their video cards, their audio cards, their configuration for their like 5th gen Intel-based processors. It's because when this is turned on, it deletes things that are legacy and will not run legacy-based applications based off of config. So don't turn this on. Now you'll note that there is something down here that's like a caveat or an asterisk that tells you that this option always leaves at least one older kernel version installed and never removes manually installed kernels. Perfect. Still don't turn it on. It's just not a good idea, especially if you run older hardware. If you have brand new cutting edge, bleeding edge hardware, you're on a 13th gen, a 14th gen, the future 15th gen, this is totally fine. You can turn it on, remove obsolete packages and stuff like that because it won't make any difference. Everything you have is supported. Everything has drivers. Everything's bleeding edge. Everything's up to date. Perfect. You'll have other issues because bleeding edge stuff usually on Linux, because the drivers haven't been developed fully yet, usually have issues. So a sweet spot for Linux is usually if the 13th and 14th gen are the new processors, you really want to be on a 10th and 11th gen. That'll be perfect for you. When the 15th and the 16th come out, then the 13th and the 14th become more stable. But you really want to run something maybe a year or two behind, which is why, again, Linux is a perfect operating system for people that don't want to spend tons of money. It just works very well for people that are not rich. Okay, so we went through the preferences. Let's close this out. Once you close it out, you're going to see that the Update Manager will automatically do a quick refresh to check for the update changes that took place. The next thing we want to do is we actually want to go in here and we want to go to kernels. So we're going to click on that. And you're going to get a warning message here. Take a screenshot of this warning message. Save this warning message. Print this warning message out, because it'll give you the information, specifically what you have to do in the event that you have an issue with the kernel update. I would suggest not checking the do not show this at update or up when you open this box again, and click on continue. Now, this is your kernel version. So we're going to see different kernel versions in here. And as they release, you'll have to install the latest kernel version you want to run. By default, this will update the kernel eventually. So you'll have to run all the updates for everything that's in here first, and then check for updates again, and then probably check for updates a third time to install the latest kernel. I will point out that that kernel update option that exists in view here is sudo apt get upgrade. So that's what corresponds to this actual kernel change or the kernel upgrade in here. Now, again, all this stuff will update just like it would in the command line. But you really have to go through and change all these settings to do the three commands, right? We have we have three different locations we have to update from. We have the software source location, we have the snap location, and we have the apt location, which is the update manager here, where we're going to update all our apts. Those three locations are the three commands. So we have the sudo snap refresh, we have sudo apt get update, and then sudo apt get upgrade. If you run those three commands, that does everything that we just went over here in the GUI. Now, again, obviously, you do what you're comfortable with, right? But I really do implore you to just use the terminal, just because it's a lot easier. At least in my opinion, it's easier than having to go through this every time you want to run updates. So now that we know we have our update configuration done, we have things set the way we want to do them, we're just going to click on Install Updates. And we should be prompted. So we're going to get the upgrade will trigger additional changes, and it's going to show us all the kernel changes that are going to take place. So we're going to say OK. And then we're going to hit the password in here. And then we're going to hit Authenticate. So now the system is going to download and install all of the updates. So while this is downloading updates, you'll notice down here in the taskbar, it changes to installing updates. Something to keep in mind is that these packages really aren't that big, right? This is 920 megs for 116 updates. If we compare that to 24H2, which I believe is 14 gigs, with the downloaded updates, this is pretty fast, especially in comparison. Especially when we compare, so a kernel update is technically a kernel update, right? So we're updating the kernel on Windows by going from 23H2 to 24H2. We're updating the kernel on Linux by going to the 6.8 package that we had to the 6.8 package that we will have. the difference is gigs versus megs. So if you have a slow internet connection, this also will make things seem a lot faster. Okay, so that finished running the updates. And if we look at the clock here, it's going to tell us it's 11:46. We started this, or at least in the video at least, at 11:41. So it took 5 minutes to run 116 updates on a system that has 2 cores and 4 gigs of memory. Okay, so let's reboot this thing. When it comes back up, we'll check for updates again. Okay, so our system just came back up after running all of our updates. And now we could do one of two things. We could sit here and wait until we get the little shield that pops up again to tell us whether or not we have all the updates, which there it is. So if we click on this, we're going to see your system is up to date. We're going to do a refresh. And we're going to see now that the system is completely up to date, at least according to the GUI. Let's take a look at our kernel versions and make sure that we have the latest kernel version installed. And we do. We could see that we now have 6.8.0-51, and that's actively installed as our kernel version. Now, you'll see it's supported until April of 2029, which means that we could run this kernel until 2029 without making any changes to it. That means that, like, if we decided, and you'll see the previous version that we had here is listed here as installed, right? So we have it here. Now, if we know that, for instance, that this 6.0 or 6.8.0-51 has everything we need and we don't need anything else and we're good, we could actually remove this kernel. So that way we save the space, but they're not that big. So keep that in mind that you're not really saving that much space, and there are alternatives to saving space. And we'll cover that next. But before we do that, I want to jump into the terminal real quick. And the reason why is because I've noticed, at least in some of the Linux Mint systems that I've had, is that even though the GUI says we're up to date, when I run the terminal command, the terminal indicates that we are not up to date. So let's take a look at that and see if these two things match. I'm going to start with sudo apt-get update, and I'm going to click enter, and I'm going to get prompted for my password and put my password in. I'm going to hit enter again. So it looks like, at least for the sudo apt-get update, that we are up to date. Let's do this again, but let's do upgrade. Okay, it looks like we are upgraded as well. Now you'll notice, at least in our upgrade version here, versus using the GUI, it ends up giving us additional indication as to deferred update. So something that's likely being phased out or changed and no longer will be upgradable or updatable, that this will likely have to be removed at some point in the future. Now the GUI will auto-remove this and the terminal will auto-remove this through the upgrade process in the future. But it's just giving you additional information as far as support for specific either drivers or kernel version or kernel software or kernel application or something to that effect. So, I mean, if you wanted to at this point, you could really just grab this and Google specifically what this does and why it's being phased out or if it's being replaced, and it'll give you more or additional information. So from a troubleshooting standpoint or a tech support standpoint, I would still implore you to use the actual command line versus using the GUI. Okay, so we've run our updates. We have all our updates installed on our system. We've made sure that our command line matches our GUI. We've made sure that this is all 100% up to date. Now, if you're on an older system, there's an additional terminal command you can run that may help you. And specifically what that command is clean. And what that does is basically run the equivalent of CCleaner on your Linux system to clear out the cache for the update files. So we downloaded 920 megs of update files, but maybe we only really need 500 megs of those files for installed files. So then we have, what, 420 gig or 420 megs of additional files that are just sparse files that are sitting on the system now. Over time, those files, the updates, the cache, all that information gets big. So you could clear gigs and gigs and gigs of data out by running this command. I wouldn't do it all the time, and if you have a ton of space on your system, then it really doesn't make any difference. But if you don't, and you have an older system with a smaller hard drive, give this a shot. And specifically what we're going to run here is sudo apt-get clean. And what this is going to do is it's going to clean the cache. So we're going to hit enter. And that's it. It's not going to give us any prompts. It's not going to give us anything, but it also doesn't show us any errors. Now, if we were actively looking at the drive size, we probably would see a slight change because the only thing we've really done on the system is just install the updates. And again, we're talking 920 megs, not 920 gigs or 9 gigs of files. So we're not going to have a huge payback or return on the actual command that we run. However, if you don't have very much hard drive space and you want to keep your system clean, you don't want to have a ton of like just junk files laying around after doing updates, this command right here may be your godsend because it'll clear out temporary files off of your system. Okay, so I think one of the last things people brought up on the questions for this thing is something called shortcuts, which is actually a sub-container located inside of the keyboard app. So what we'll do is we'll click on the start menu here and we'll go to keyboards and click on that, and we're going to go to shortcuts. So what shortcuts actually does is it gives you the ability to create a key binding. So if you compare it to like a Windows environment, you would have like the Windows key R to open up the run terminal or run command logic. So this shortcuts option actually gives you the ability to create the key bindings as to defining specifically what certain key combinations do to open up applications. So if we go in here and we choose like sound and media here and we expand this, we could choose like volume mute, right? And then we could see like the keyboard bindings. So if we choose audio mute, we could add a custom shortcut to this, can name it something, and then create a command to do it. Or we could go under quiet keys. So we could see quiet keys to volume mute quiet. Alt plus audio mute will allow us to mute the actual data or the actual quiet key. We'll notice that we have Alt plus audio low volume, and then we have Alt plus audio raise volume. And you could go in here and choose specifically, so like the home folder is super and E, which should just be the Windows key and E. So if we do that, we could just do Windows key E. There you go. We opened up the home folder. So that's, again, basically what these key bindings do is to allow you to create a custom configuration to open up certain applications or open up certain pages or certain variables in the system by using command keys on your keyboard. It's kind of a cool thing because it gives you the ability to make customizations. And the more customizations you make, obviously, the more this becomes your operating system. Okay, so the last part of this is backups. Now, obviously, if you're going to put all this time into building the operating system the way you want it, you have the ability to create your SH file or your bash script now, so you could create your customized package so you could do your install relatively quick without having to do everything hunt and peck style, which we reviewed in part 2 of the videos. You know how to go through and navigate, create your shortcuts, your applications and stuff, and tag them to the desktop. You know how to run all the updates through the Guey. But now let's talk about backups. Now, there's 2 different ways to do backups on the Linux system. And I will tell you right now that on my particular system, my work system, I have a secondary hard drive dedicated directly to backups. That's an internal hard drive. And that internal hard drive is about 6 terabytes. I want to say I bought that drive, I think, at Micro Center, also not affiliated with the channel. But hey, Micro Center, if you want to, help me out, feel free to, send me whatever you want. But yeah, Micro Center is where I get most of my hardware from, just because their pricing is a lot better than anything you're going to find, especially like Amazon and other places like that. Yeah, Micro Center, local retail box store. Check them out. It's just microcenter.com. That's where I get most of my stuff. And actually, if you're smart, you wait until just before Christmas every year. It's about 2 weeks before Christmas. They start to run their sale. And when they do that, you could do a build your own PC for about 500 bucks for like a 13th, the prior gen. So I mean, like now with the 14th, you get a 13th gen. When the 15s come out, you get a 14th gen. So you could get hardware relatively cheap. And if you're smart about it, every 2 years you could replace a system board, and you could replace the processor and use your memory and everything else. And for about $300 to $500, you could get yourself a blazing state-of-the-art machine, usually an i7 or an AMD chipset if you want a Ryzen 7 or a Ryzen 5. I mean, it's a great place to check out hardware. Again, microcenter.com, check them out. But with that said, the reason why I bring that up is because I got a 6 terabyte hard drive from there. Maybe I paid 45 bucks for it, $50 for it. It's nothing special. I think it's just a Hitachi drive. Again, nothing special. Threw it in the system, 6 terabytes of storage, and then at that point, I started to use something called Timeshift. So what is Timeshift? Let's take a look at what Timeshift is. So if I go into Start here and I type in time, we will see Timeshift, and I'm going to click on this. It's going to prompt me for credentials. I'm going to authenticate. So now, in Timeshift, what it is it's an application that's designed to give you the ability to take snapshots. Now, snapshots are obviously different than backups, but a snapshot is something that you would take before you make a serious system change. So if you take a snapshot and you make a change and something goes seriously awry, you could just roll back the snapshot to the previous version and you're good to go. You could literally do this before every single update, as long as you don't use automatic updates to do so. And then at that point, when the system takes the snapshot, if the update screws up the system, you could just roll the system back. You don't have to go through anything, and it works fantastic. It's honestly just as good as taking a snapshot in like VMware. Anybody that's out there that's used VMware before knows you can take a snapshot, roll back. It works just as well as that. And it's built in, free of charge, in your Linux Mint system. So on this particular system, I don't have an additional drive. We only have 8 gigs of drive space available. So I'm not going to be able to take a backup of this because I want to say that the total size is maybe 30 gigs on the drive. So about 20 gigs of this actual system is running the system. So I don't have enough space to take a snapshot. But I can go into Create. And Create will run. I mean, it's going to fail, right? Because we don't have enough drive space to create a snapshot. But basically what it'll do is it'll create a snapshot. See, now we're down to 6.1 gigs, so it's quick, right? So 2 gigs of drive space was almost instantaneous. But maybe if I go into the wizard, it would be more helpful. All right, so we can see the snapshot type. So we do rsync and we do next. It's going to estimate the size of the actual snapshot in order for us to run the snapshot. And you're going to notice it's only going to have a single location for the drive, and that's because this system only has a single location for the drive. And you're going to notice the caveats down here as to what's supported. So you can't use certain things. Network locations are not supported. You can't use like a UNC path to get there or an SMB share to access it in order to back up to that location with a snapshot. It's not allowed. It's got to be an internal drive. So you need to get yourself an internal drive. And again, 6 terabyte drive, I really think it was under 50 bucks. I just popped it in there. It's just a spinning disk. It's nothing special. It runs my snapshots. I take snapshots frequently on that system because, again, it's my work system. And this is really helpful for somebody that wants to run or make changes on their system that is concerned that the changes are going to break something. You can take a snapshot and just literally roll back the snapshot after it's done, and you're good to go. Okay, so what I did is I actually deleted the snapshot. But if you needed to do that, all you have to do is just go to Browse. It'll take you to the snapshot location. And then you literally just highlight whatever you want to delete, the snapshot that's in there, and you just click delete. Now, if you take a full snapshot, it'll show in here, in which case you could choose delete or restore, depending on where you wanted to go back to. But it gives you a way to roll back to certain points in time in the operating system. Think of it like the system restore in Windows, but only it works. So, that's something to keep in mind, is that it works. The problem with the system restore in Windows is, generally speaking, the VSS or the volume shadow copy services is what actually runs to take the system backups. And the VSS shadow copy service in a ransomware or a virus attack is almost always the first thing that gets infected and infects the actual backup. So 90% of the time, those backups don't work on Windows. This doesn't work that way because, first of all, it needs to be escalated. Second of all, it only supports internal drives. Third of all, it's not in the actual OS location. It's stored on a separate drive. Fourth, it's an encrypted backup. And then fifth, obviously, you have to access it with a credential to get into it to actually open it or to run it as a backup or a snapshot, rather. So this just works a lot better, and I would suggest checking it out. If you don't know about it, you're going to need a drive in the machine to do it, but it's worth it because any change you make, if you need to roll back, you can without causing catastrophic issues. Something else to keep in mind with this is if you take a snapshot and the whole system crashes and you can't get back to it to do the restore, if you reinstall the OS, you could remount that drive and literally find those snapshots in here and authenticate to them, grab them, and restore them on the system. So they still work as a backup restoration location. Okay, so now that we looked at snapshots, let's look at actual backups. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to click on Start, and we're going to type in Backup, and we're going to see the backup tool that's built into our Mint operating system. We're going to click on that. And in here, we're going to get two options. We're going to get the ability to back up our personal files, and we're going to get the ability to back up software selection. Now, obviously, we don't have to back up the software selection. And the reason why I say that is because if you follow the previous video on how to create the sh file or the bash file to script your install, you could literally use that and then save that on an external drive or a thumb drive and just throw that inside the system case and keep it there. So that way, in the future, if you do have to reinstall, the only thing you'll really have to restore are your personal files. Because everything else on the system would just be run through that script, right? You're going to install the OS, you're going to run that script, you're good. If you use the Timeshift application, you're going to install the OS, you'd use the Timeshift, you'd restore everything, and you'd be good. But if you restored an OS, or rather you reinstalled the OS from scratch, the latest kernel version, it's newer, it's updated, it's a completely different piece of hardware, whatever it is, you could restore your personal file and then just run that sh script to reinstall your packages and not have to worry about this. So there's a variety of options here in doing this to restore a system. But at least from my perspective and what has worked for me the best is just to restore, or rather back up my personal files and not worry so much about the software selection, because I have the script, I can run the .sh file, it will reinstall all of my software selection. So I don't really have any need to restore or back this up and store that additional space. Something to also keep in mind is, technically speaking, the Timeshift Snapshots is a bare metal recovery. And the difference between a bare metal recovery and a file level or block level backup is that a bare metal recovery recovers your system back to the exact state before the issue. So if you're restoring from a snapshot, you're restoring back to the exact state before that issue occurred, presumably, right? Because you took a snapshot before the issue occurred. However, if you're restoring the backup files, you're really just restoring the files. You're not restoring the operating system. If you want to restore the operating system, then you would need to select the software selection or run that sh script. But because, again, the Linux operating system, the way it works, there's really no reason to do the software selection and just to use the sh file to do the reinstallation, only because it doesn't take very much time. The configuration really isn't that difficult. Again, it's up to you, but in my opinion, Timeshift's a better idea just because you can take a snapshot and then just do a personal file level backup and don't worry about the software selection. But again, if you want to do both, it's just in here. So let's collect what we're going to back up, and we're going to choose Backup Now. And then we're going to have to choose a solution or a location where we want to actually back up the file. So right now we're choosing Backups, but we could choose Other. And if we had another location, like an external drive or anything plugged into this, we could choose that and open it. So for the time being, we'll just choose Backups and we'll do Forward. And then we're going to see, please add files or directories to list below to exclude them from the backups. So the backup folder itself, by default, is in the Documents location. And obviously, you can't back up a folder that's being backed up. You would cause a loop. So you want to leave that alone. And you want to add any other things you want to exclude. So if you want to exclude certain directories from your backup, you could. Then you're going to click Forward. The next thing is, if you have hidden files or folders, you're going to have to add them manually because the system will not automatically back up hidden files or folders. If you don't, then you just, at this point, would just click Apply, and the system would take the backup. Now, keep in mind, again, the system's not that big. We don't really have too much as far as like files that are available to backup because there's nothing in any of these directories. But if we now drill into the Documents location and we go into Backups, we're going to see a tar file here, which is the backup of the actual system. You'll see it's only 7.6 meg. That's about what it is, right? Because there's nothing really, as far as a backup is concerned, in here, right? We have our snap directory of documents, and we have desktop. That doesn't really do much. We have our two SH files, right? Our application installation and application removal. There's really not much in there. So that's our backup. So if you want to back up the applications, we can do that too. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go back and start, type in backups or backup tool. We're going to choose software selection and backup now. Now you'll notice that I don't have any applications installed because everything that's in the apt package of this system is default out of the box, so it's not going to give me much of anything to choose. But you can still hit forward and it'll still run the backup. And then on here we'll see the backup package list. Okay, so now that we have a backup done, how do we restore it? Well, on your new system that you presumably just installed, you would go into your backup again, select backup tool, and then at that point, you would click on Restore. And then you'd get the option in here as to what you want to do. Do you want to only restore the missing files, or do you want to overwrite the changes of the content that exists? So in other words, if you took a backup of the files, but you screwed something up in like Excel, and you want to restore that file, you could restore that file and overwrite that file with the backup you took. If you wanted to select the backup, obviously you'd have to click on the thing and then choose the backup and choose open. So now we would see the backup to restore. We're going to say no, only restore missing files. We're going to choose forward, and there you go. Completed successfully, we restored the files. So hopefully this helps everybody that had a comment down below and needed additional answered questions or had some kind of concern with doing certain things, maybe packages that aren't as well or easy to understand. Because again, we all get very used to using Windows-based stuff. So like NT Backup, Windows Backup, Backup Exec, Net Backup. There's so many of them out there at this point that I couldn't even begin to describe every single backup utility and program. And there are tons that exist for Linux too, but the Linux Mint platform comes with some that are relatively easy to use. They make sense, they're intuitive, they're not difficult to run. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to install it. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to remove it. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to recover or to run the backup itself. It's all very simple to use. So let me know down in the comments if I missed anything. If there's anything additional that you guys need help on, shoot me something down below. Again, video 3, 4, and 5 are in the mix. I have a video 6 again that I'll be working on at some point just to go over how to create a heat map. I don't think I'm going to include that as part of this this series, but it's something that I think would be helpful to some of the techs out there or business owners that want to see why their Wi-Fi isn't working correctly. You could do it for free. You just need an old laptop, and chances are with Windows 11 coming out, you're going to have an old laptop. Thanks again for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks, guys. Take it easy.